All right, we're here in the Renaissance. Here's our definition, just to refresh. It's the rebirth, Renaissance, in the interest, activity, and spirit of classical Greek and Roman art, literature, and learning. Now, a common misconception is that during the Middle Ages, all of the ancient Roman and ancient Greek stuff was just completely forgotten, deleted, Control Z, undo. That's not the reality of the situation. Instead, what we see looking back at Western civilization and specifically in Europe, what we have is the fall of Rome leads to this hybridity of new and different ideas, the Middle Ages, and then a look back at what had been lost or altered before the Middle Ages. Does that make sense? So a rebirth, a renaissance, is really just a refresher of what was part of the art and architecture and literature and song and writing and understanding or approach to the world as seen through the eyes of the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. Yes? We're going to start our look at the Renaissance in Italy. This slide here. So we're going to start our look at the Renaissance in Italy, and we're going to be looking at the beginning of the Renaissance. So we would call this the early Italian Renaissance. And then this slide I've put up here to give you a heads up on some terminology that you might see or hear in textbooks or in articles or online. The word Quattrocento, you see it there? Quattrocento. This is a kind of shorthand for the early Renaissance in Italy. It's Italian. The word Quattrocento is Italian, and it literally translates to 400s. Quattro, 400s. Cento. So is this the year 400, Miss Cortez? No. Think of it this way. It's 1,000 plus 400. Does that make sense? So it's the 400th years after the millennia. And this is a term that is often used to define the beginning of the Renaissance in Italy, and not just in art, but architecture and literature and song and poem. So you might see that term Quattrocento, and that is specifically talking about the early Italian Renaissance. Just another way to help frame this out for us. Look at our timeline. We came out of the Middle Ages, the middle period between the classical world and the rebirth of the classical world, or the Renaissance. In terms of cultural context, what we are going to see is a rise in population, a rise in commerce, a rise in international commerce that was part of the Gothic world and is really going to be flourishing into the Renaissance. Another element that is going to affect the art and architecture of the Renaissance is the fall of the Byzantine Empire. Huh? Miss Cortez, I have no familiarity with this. What are you talking about? At the same time, the medieval world was happening in the continent of Europe. Over and surrounding what is now modern-day Turkey and Greece was a larger empire, the Byzantine Empire. And the Byzantine Empire was a Christian Roman Empire. Christian Roman Empire? Yes, it was established during the fall of the ancient Roman Empire, way back in the 4th century. And this map, what you see is the extent of its territory at its, or the largest extent of its territory. And over the course of hundreds of years, the empire, the Byzantine Empire, which is called that because the capital city, Constantinople, was once the old Greek city Byzantium, and so it gets the nickname the Byzantine Empire. Over hundreds and hundreds of years, the empire shrunk. Now, many of the reasons involved politics and religion. It was during the Byzantine Empire that we see the creation and rise of the new faith, Islam. And the Islamic faith will come through and absorb areas of North Africa and the Near East and into Asia Minor, sapping many of the resources, natural resources, commerce, trade from the Byzantine Empire. Additionally, there are going to be conflicts between European forces and the Byzantine Empire, which this class cannot cover. So if you want to know more about the Byzantine Empire, email me. I really am fascinated by it. I have lots of information I can share with you. Also, I encourage you to take a History of Western Civilization course because they will talk about the Byzantine Empire in more detail. The reason I bring this up is because of this little blue arrow I drew on the map. As the empire is collapsing, many people are going to flee, and a majority of those people are going to travel to Europe, and specifically in the Italian peninsula. And when you think of people fleeing a collapsing empire, you need to think of them as artists and scholars and doctors and poets and playwrights and potters and architects, and all of those artisans are going to now establish themselves over in Western Europe. And in so doing, they're going to be influential to further development of art and architecture in Western Europe. Okay, keep that in mind because it's going to come up again when we look at the art. But before we get to the art, just a little bit more context. I want to introduce you to the idea of who is paying for the artworks. Unlike what we have or experience in a lot of modern day art creation, it's not going to be a lot of artists who are making things just to express themselves. I want to create for the sake of creation. No, I want you to think of art during this time as a job, and you get paid to make art. And the person who pays, the patron is going to decide what the art is going to look like. It's not up to you to experiment. Instead, it's going to be you fulfilling the requirements as laid out by the patron. I emphasize this because we're going to be looking at a lot of artworks and a lot of artists, but we also have to consider the purpose or the function of that artwork that the artist was paid for, because that has a lot to do with the message or ideas that the patron, the person who paid for that art, wanted to present or convey or tell us, tell you and me in the artwork. Now, here we are looking at a map of Italy during the Quattrocento, and we need to understand that there is a growing European merchant class, this middle class that is going to be fostering a lot more art commissions. This middle class of merchants, they have lots of money. Oh, that's a nice, think of that. Moneyed merchant class, and they want to present themselves in this world as not a peasant and yet not at the stature of some of the leading rulers of the land. And so how do they do that? How do they present themselves as different from the peasant class, the serfs, the lower classes? Art. And that is going to include fashion. That is going to include paintings and architecture, massive commissions for these beautiful artworks that we're going to be looking at in this class. So we have a rise of merchant class that is going to be feeding more art into the world, more artists, literally feeding artists. This is going to lead to an increase in artist status. Artists are going to become even more important to helping these merchants establish themselves. I'm just laying out some ideas, and we're going to pick these up as we go throughout the rest of this lecture and the next lecture and the next lecture and the next lecture. Okay? Okay.